I know that this is a difficult topic, and I will be completely honest with you. I procrastinated a little bit on filming this part of the Mikveh series, but in a world that either cheapens the physical impulse or that declares it as somehow unholy, Judaism shows us a middle way, a sacred path that says it is both beautiful and it is something that merits our attention, our commitment, our love, and our joy. A nice cup of Earl Grey from some Ainsley and Royal Stafford fine bone china. They are not a matching set, but they go together pretty well. And I like the blue, that beautiful turquoise ocean blue, very appropriate for today's topic. Shalom mishpachah, Rabbi Esther here, and I am here to continue our Mikveh series. And today I'm going to talk about taharat hamishpachah, the ritual rules around separation and reunification between partners if one of the partner or more has their monthly cycle. That is about as delicate as I can put it. Friends, this is a sequel to my first video on Mikveh, which delineated some of the basic ideas of Mikveh, what constitutes a kosher Mikveh, how we use a mikveh in the Jewish community and all of its various and diverse applications. Now it's time to literally spill the tea over a topic that is both incredibly beautiful but also quite controversial. So here's your content warning. If frank discussion of human intimacy and human physiology makes you feel uncomfortable, this might be a good moment for you to tune out. Of course, we will keep it very respectful and dignified here on YouTube, but Jewish law, halakha, and Jewish practice makes no bones about its claim that it has a mission to sanctify our bodies and our bodily functions, and a frank and empowered discussion of those functions is necessary in order for us to have that conversation. So without further ado, in the Mikveh series, taharat hamishpachah, the laws of family purity, or the laws of nida, menstrual separation. On my previous Mikveh video, I got a lot of feedback because Mikveh is not discussed as much in non-Orthodox egalitarian spaces as it is in Orthodox spaces. So I'm really excited to add to the conversation. Mikveh has been a personal passion of mine for a long time, over 16 years, since I've been educating myself about it, and I even wrote a little booklet in my native tongue about Mikveh. I have a long backstory with this mitzvah and this particular iteration of the mitzvah as well. I will also say that as a rabbinic teacher, I'm used to sharing aspects of my personal life as a way of rabbinic modeling. This one, of course, is a little bit more delicate. I will not be talking too much about my own practice. What happens on the internet stays on the internet. Part of rabbinic modeling is that we showcase how we live and practice the mitzvot and how they bring us great meaning and joy. And this is one of the mitzvot that is part of my life. But there are countless testimonials, testimonies, stories, and experiences of other people who go to the Mikveh monthly, which are available online and that can help you get into the more lived experience side of things. Without further ado, friends, where does taharat hamishpachah come from and why do we keep it today? Or I should say, why do we still keep it today? First of all, if you want a good working definition on tumah and tahara, what is often translated or mistranslated as impure and pure, or impurity and purity, I do recommend my previous video where I go into that and reinterpret those as categories dancing between the nexus of life and death. I'm not going to go too much into that, but I will say that these categories do not carry moral stigma with them. These are not categories about, first of all, physical uncleanliness or dirtiness. or the disgust impulse or a moral taint. None of that applies. This is about some of us adhering to an interpretation where we see Judaism's sanctifying role in marking the nexus and continuum between life and death and the loss of potential life. This applies to the purity laws more broadly, including the ones that have lapsed since the destruction of the Beit HaMikdash, the temple. A lot of our purity laws no longer apply because we don't need to be pure in order to go to the temple. So it's kind of become a moot point in many cases. But this part of traditional Jewish law still exists, even without the temple. And people ask why. The mitzvah of physical separation during the cycle is given in Vayikra, in the book of Leviticus. And it is one very simple line in chapter 18:19, which is part of the holiness code and part of the cultic prohibitions on unlicensed intercourse. Va'al isha benidat tumata lo tikrav legalot ervata. Do not draw near a woman who is in her time of separation and uncover her nakedness. I.e., when a woman is experiencing her menstrual cycle, do not have physical intercourse or relations with her. That is all the Torah really gives us. So what does that mean and how is that practiced? Well, that is a great and complicated discussion in rabbinic law, and that is some of the conversations we're going to be having today, especially from a non-orthodox egalitarian perspective, where you may want to make decisions about how strictly or leniently you want to apply the sacred practice in your own life. Just a note on gender and sexuality and sexual orientation. Most people have a uterus and identify as female, and may either be in a heterosexual or homosexual relationship. Other people have a uterus and do not identify as female. As with anything, this is an LGBTQ affirming space. All I'm really interested in for the purpose of this video is whoever has a uterus and experiences monthly flow. That is what's up for discussion here. Thank you for coming to my gender egalitarian, LGBTQ affirming TED Talk. So what's going on here? The Torah doesn't really tell us how to separate. Does that mean no touch, or does it limit it to platonic touch? Does that mean staying in different parts of the house or sleeping in the same bed? You could imagine a number of scenarios, and there are many cultures across the world that sanctify and culturally regulate a person's cycle and other bodily emissions. And, the Torah doesn't really give us a clear answer. What we do know is that the Torah does not just single out people with monthly cycles. People with all kinds of seminal and bodily emissions are asked to immerse in a mikveh after having had those emissions. So I really do want to bring home the point that the purity laws in the Torah are actually pretty gender blind and gender egalitarian. Anyone who has a body and that body can emit things can render themselves spiritually in a distinct state that requires re-entry through immersion in living waters. It's the rabbis in the Talmud who really go to town on this. There is a lot to talk about here, and I'm probably not going to get to all of it. How initially the Torah mandates 7 days of separation, but then the Banat Yisrael, the daughters of the Jewish people, out of their piety perhaps, took on an extra white week, meaning that the period of separation would be stretched out for 2 weeks, or 12 days to 2 weeks. There are conversations about, was this a way to enhance fertility, or was this seen, erroneously perhaps, as a way of practicing spaced births? We don't know. There is a lot about these laws that we don't know. But we do know that in the rabbinic period, they became more lenient in some ways and more stringent in other ways. So they became more stringent in terms of the time of separation and how the partners or spouses would interact around each other. They became more lenient in the sense that while communal practice may have varied throughout the centuries, and it is sometimes hard to unpick misogyny and sexism and patriarchy from these concerns and practices, generally women were not shut out of communal life if they had their monthly flow. There's actually no prohibition on touching the Torah, reading the Torah, or saying certain prayers when it is that time of the month. I have this theory that the rabbinic model took a cultic ritual taboo and transformed it into a marital discipline for the synchronization and the elevation of human desire. I think the rabbis, after the temple was gone, were less interested in the cultic aspects of this or the ritual aspects of this, and more in the inner sanctification of home life and the relationships, physical and emotional, between spouses. That is my theory, that what the rabbis attempted to do when they created these laws, maybe it was to control women, maybe it was to exercise a modicum of control over married folks in their community. I am not saying more critical readings are incorrect, but I think for the last 1500, 1800, 2000 years that we have practiced these laws and studied these laws, the conversation has been and continues to be today about how this discipline can sanctify a marriage and the relationship and bring partners closer together through enhanced communication, focusing away from the physical, learning to appreciate the spiritual, intellectual, and emotional in each other, and very importantly, and I will admit to being an apologist, give a woman full consent over her physical body that not even the husband and his desires could violate. So I know that I have said a lot, so let's fine-tune it a little bit for a more enhanced understanding of what is going on with Mikveh. Nida de Oraita, Nida according to Torah law, is exactly that. The 7 days of separation, unspecified what that separation is or how it looks like, immersion in a Mikveh, and then the rejoining of the partners. In Nida de Rabbanan, in the rabbinic understanding of Nida, as I said earlier, there was an extra white week, the Shiva Neki'im, the 7 white days, tagged onto that to lengthen the period of separation, essentially creating a rhythm within marriage of 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off, 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off. And in many Orthodox communities that is still practiced today, although in modern Orthodox communities there are questions being asked about this extra week and whether it should be maintained or whether we should revert back to the biblical observance of the mitzvah. In terms of the traditional practice, you can really go to town, from very exacting ritual procedures to a more lenient approach. And if you are more interested in the exacting procedures, I would actually recommend you reach out to an Orthodox educator, whether male or female. I have already discussed the minimum amount of days, going from 7 to 12 or 14, depending on the length of one cycle. And I've also talked a little bit about the Halakhic, the distances. And these also became more strict in the rabbinic period. Since the Torah doesn't really indicate what it means to be distanced from each other during this time, the rabbis delineate a fairly strict regime of distancings of Halakhic. In the most orthodox of observances, this might be no physical touch at all, right down to putting down an object between the two of you and not passing it directly into one's hands. This is not about, well, to put it bluntly, cooties, because women on their cycle can touch other relatives, including male relatives. They can touch their fathers, they can touch their sons, they can touch their brothers. We are not concerned about the wider implications of Tumah in light of a temple system anymore. It seems that the Halakhic are all about refining this moral and emotional discipline of not being tempted to transgress what we would call a fence around the Torah. And I also think that these distancings are open to interpretation. Ultra-Orthodox voices will disagree with me, but I actually think that this is the area in which couples can negotiate to what extent they want to observe these distancings. For some people, that might be not touching at all. For other people, that might be touching platonically, but not erotically or sensually. That is up to each of us to decide as we navigate this system of mitzvot. There are also intricate laws with regards to checking when you're ready to immerse. I refer you to an experienced teacher of these laws. No person on the internet should just dispense halakhic advice that's actually incredibly complex and nuanced, and where people are more likely to be stringent on themselves, more stringent than they need to be. After the cycle has ended and the number of days has been counted that you observe, you go to the mikveh and you immerse in the mikveh. And I will link resources from Ma'im Chaim and other open community mikvahot down below in terms of how you prepare to go to the mikveh. I'm not going to go into all of the preparations. Suffice to say that you have to be absolutely clean before you enter the mikveh, and you can have no chatzitza, no barriers between you and your skin, i.e. no earrings, no jewelry, no contact lenses, no makeup, no dentures. But again, I'm not going to dispense halakhic advice through YouTube. What I will say, and this is important, and this is also why I keep on referring out to the Halakhic authority or the Jewish authority as per your denominational comfort zone. There is an issue with something called Halakhic infertility. Halakhic infertility is a condition where a woman is actually perfectly fertile, but if her ovulation hits before her immersion date, she may not conceive because she will not be having intercourse. I always teach about this because I think it's irresponsible to teach about mikveh without teaching some of the complexities of mikveh. That is why I think it's of the utmost importance that if you do choose to observe the extra week, that you learn with an appropriate guide and that you learn the functions and cycles of your body, including the interventions and analysis that you can do on your body in order to prevent halakhic infertility. So please inform yourself appropriately both around your ovulatory cycle and around the halachot or the laws that you choose to practice and the guidance you can get from specialists in this field. I have talked about other functions of mikveh in my previous video, and in my next video I will be talking about mikveh and the high holidays, and that will draw this series to a conclusion. But I did want to talk a little bit about the spiritual and emotional ramifications of taharat hamishpachah. Taharat hamishpachah is a bit of a Rorschach test. People either really vibe with it and find it intriguing and interesting and empowering and uplifting, or people have some pretty deep-seated reservations, if not outright criticisms, of what they see as an outdated and misogynist practice. And some people, even with the course of their lives, have moved up and down that spectrum between these two positions. What I will say is that however you interpret this mitzvah, consent, empowerment, and freedom of choice needs to be at the heart of that. I know that for me, as a liberal Jewish, egalitarian, feminist, female rabbi, oh my god, that's a mouthful, I am able to make certain choices about my bodily autonomy and how I want to integrate Torah into my life that other people may not be able to make. And I'm very cognizant of that privilege. For me, I think the practice has value. And even if it doesn't have value for you and it doesn't speak to you, I think learning about the practice, understanding the people in the communities that do observe the practice has merit in and of itself. As for mikveh observance in the non-Orthodox community, it's rising. The Rising Waters Open Mikveh movement is building and fundraising for one mikveh after another, and it is incredibly exciting. Mikveh is one of those mitzvahs that's incredibly tangible, whether you do it for conversion, to honor the cycles of your body, whether you do it for personal transitions or holy days. Immersing in water and feeling that water on your skin and literally letting go of everything around you and surrendering into the waves and into the cosmic womb is incredibly beautiful and poignant. And I have guided many people on their mikveh journey, both for the sake of conversion as well as for the sake of their monthly cycles and other life moments. And even when people don't expect it to affect them positively, it very often does. Surprisingly high numbers of people actually do, including in the non-Orthodox world. Many non-Orthodox folks will go for marriage, both partners, very often irrespective of gender, and there is an uptick in people going to the mikveh for their monthly immersion as well. Here is where we're going to get a little bit philosophical. Judaism postulates that our world, our earth, the cycles of nature, the cycles of our bodies and our physical being are holy and can be sanctified, including our physical and intimate relationships. Judaism is a sex-positive religion or sacred practice, as long as that physical intimacy gets expressed through appropriate means. What constitutes appropriate means is, of course, up for debate. At the center of the Jewish philosophy, the hashkafah, the worldview around physical intimacy, is safety, enthusiastic consent, pleasure, emotional depth, commitment, and spiritual unification. All of these things have value in Judaism and matter. We do not see the physical impulse as negative, sinful, or depraved, or anything like that. We actually see it as a really powerful way to get close to the divine and close to each other. It is also something that requires the utmost ethics. Even within committed relationships, you need enthusiastic consent. And I think that a positive gloss, an affirming read on these sacred practices around the monthly cycle and mikveh is this mission to align and synchronize partners' desires by signaling that there are moments and aspects to the relationship where you're off limits to each other. You're saying, I have my bodily integrity, I have my physical autonomy, not right now. Now I'm going to retreat into my own space and just be. And when we come back together again, we are going to override the stasis that can happen in long-term relationships and actively choose and celebrate the moment of our reunification. Like any other mitzvah that hinges on this idea of separation for the sake of unification and integration, this is really it. It allows us to reappreciate each other, both as re'im, as friends, and as ahuvim, as beloveds, as the Sheva Brachot, the 7 wedding blessings, puts it. Having a framework that says, yes, the divine is even part of this aspect of our lives, and we are going to consciously engage in evaluating and re-evaluating our relationship, both to ourselves, our bodies, and each other. So yes, I think it's absolutely possible to have an egalitarian, feminist, empowered, liberal view of mikveh. And it goes without saying that for each of us, we will have to discern what series of practices feels right to us and our relationships, and what practices are not for us. I know that this is a difficult topic, and I'll be completely honest with you. I procrastinated a little bit on filming this part of the Mikveh series because I take my duty of speaking earnestly and sincerely on this topic with expertise and education, while also knowing my own limits very, very seriously. But in a world that either cheapens the physical impulse or that declares it as somehow unholy, Judaism shows us a middle way, a sacred path that says it is both beautiful and it is something that merits our attention, our commitment, our love, and our joy. That we are created for sanctification in the image of God and to delight in each other. Ani ledodi v'dodi li, for I am my beloved and my beloved is mine. Thank you so much for joining me today. Feel free to drop loads of comments and questions down below, including your own experiences with Mikveh. But please, let's join in the conversation together. I will share resources below. And of course, like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, and hit me up with some love in the comment section if you enjoyed this kind of content. Wishing you Shana Tova, a very happy and sweet new year, and I will see you in the next one. Shalom uvracha, with peace and blessings, from my bayit to your bayit. Bye.